Welcome to another Neuroscience Wisdom podcast with Adrian Noriega. Adrian is a lot of things, but works at CIHR Institute of Aging Fellow. He's a CIHR Institute of Aging Fellow that is at the Neuro, which is McGill. He's also into clinical and regulatory stuff. And that is at Perceive AI. He's also an MIT Catalyst Fellow. Adrian is fascinated since quite a while with neuroscience, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're also going to talk about Perceive AI, which is a cool company based in Montreal. Both me and Adrian were living in Montreal at some point. Adrian now, me a couple of years ago, love the city, love McGill. And everything that's going on right now. At some point was AI. There's still a lot of AI stuff going on in Montreal. And neuroscience has always been an advanced field in Montreal. A whole bunch of other things, for example, pharma. I started my first nootropic company there. So excited to talk with Adrian today. Adrian, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about what you're up to nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to be here, Charles. So I am a physician. I'm Adrian. I'm a physician scientist, and as you mentioned, a CIHR fellow at the Neuro. That's a Montreal Neurological Institute in Montreal. And as you mentioned, I wear a couple of hats. I'm also the clinical and regulatory lead at Perceive AI, which is a precision medicine company specialized in forecasting disease progression. At Perceive, our main focus is the forecasting of disease evolution in neurodegenerative diseases, specifically in Alzheimer's disease. And it's a very exciting time to be in the Alzheimer's disease field because a couple of years ago, the first promising drug to treat neurodegenerative diseases, specifically to treat cognitive decline in Alzheimer's, came with some interesting results. And then another drug, lecanemab, came and got full approval by the FDA. And now there's other drugs in the pipeline that are under review. So it's a very exciting time to be in a field where for so long there was no treatment for patient experiencing the disease and its devastating symptoms. So that's a bit about me.
So how did the progress in Alzheimer's disease and dementia advance so quick? Because it seems like it was quiet, and it seems that just like the number of pathways in machine learning algorithm, or just like in GPT, at some amount of numbers, stuff starts to get pretty wild and we start getting results. But before that, it's almost dead silent. So what do you attribute that fast progress, or that from one day to the other overnight success in that field?
So there's two different things. The actual drugs that one of which already came into the market, and the others that are in the pipeline came through a very conventional clinical trial structure. So that part has not been quick. That part took more than a couple of decades of try and fails trials for so long. More than 99% of the trials in Alzheimer's disease fail massively. There was very little success in the space other than the more symptomatic treatment, just treating the symptoms that come with the disease, treating the anxiety, treating the aggressiveness, treating all of that side components, but not really treating the decline, the cognitive and functional decline. So that was a bit more of a conventional understanding of the science, and there was little machine learning involved in that aspect. So Those trials, the way they work, they are screening individuals based in some specific characteristics, based in some risk profiles of individuals, but the assessment is very conventional. They're screened. Some of the ones who are thought to meet the eligibility requirements for the trial are just included in the trial, enrolled, and they're followed. And then you are hoping or you are expecting that some of those percentages are going to decline and meet meet the output of the trial. But that's a very conventional way. And at Perceive, we believe that for so long, we believe that there's a better way. So we believe that using, as you mentioned, machine learning, we don't necessarily have to enroll all of those patients into those trials to arrive to the same conclusion. Basically, you can understand based on certain characteristics, you can train models that allow you to determine which individuals are more suitable candidates for the trial. That allows you to reduce the sample size of the trial while also increasing the power of the study. And the reason for this is like usually you're taking a very educated guess when you do a more conventional clinical trial, because you are expecting that certain individuals are going to decline, but it's really there's very few ways of really knowing who is actually going to meet or follow the designed path that you're expecting them to follow. Well, when you use machine learning to train these models in large, enormous pools of data sets and then identify these patterns, you're going beyond a reasonable doubt, and you're really going into a very high percentage of certain that these individuals are going to either decline or remain stable. So you're really changing the pattern. So you don't need to recruit 5,000, 6,000. You really can do it with around half of those. And that's savings that also accelerates your chances of success.
Right. So when do you think, in terms of timeline, when do you think we would have a quote unquote cure to Alzheimer, which is also tough to say because if the disease is on its way, it already has killed a bunch of brain cells. So would it stop the progression? Would it slow the progression, or could we even reverse the damage that's done?
So that's the interesting thing. So there's two different things. One is can we treat patients that are already going into that decline path and slow or stop the decline? That's one thing. And then there's the question of a cure or a disease modifying drug that's actually going to solve or kind of eradicate the problem and not only stop the decline, the cognitive and functional decline, but also going to reverse this trajectory, and it's actually going to arrive to some improvements. So the current drugs, the one that has been approved, has shown to slow the decline and even stop it for a certain period of time. So you're able to keep that individual if you treat them at the right time. So it has to be a very specific window. So this is a window which is called mild cognitive impairment, MCI. This is before you arrive to dementia. So the patients might be already functional, living in the community, living at home. And that's where you want to intervene. So these drugs are very set for this population. But if you progress into the more dementia phase, where it's more advanced and you're already not necessarily able to live autonomously, then the possibilities of adverse reactions and improvement are much less. So the possibility of adverse reaction is much more, and the possibility of improvement is much less. So this is where we are currently at. For arriving to a cure itself, I think we're only at the beginning. So at the beginning of this new era of opportunities and discoveries in the Alzheimer's disease space, because this couple of drugs, which are something called monoclonal antibodies, that target specific one protein, which is called amyloid. This is only the beginning. With this technology and with this understanding, we can start something like combination therapy. So taking a couple of these medications and seeing how do they work. And I think towards the end of this decade, we are probably going to start being in a very, very strong position to start treating and managing the disease and eventually curing some of them if we identify them early. Just by removing this neurotoxin protein called amyloid, we expect to see improvement, but this is not explaining all of the elements of the disease. The disease has, like, people not only have this neurotoxin protein, they have other elements, right? They have chronic diseases like hypertension, they have diabetes, other elements that are pushing as well their cognitive decline and their functional decline. So we're going to attack one side of the problem, but still there's other elements to fix.
You mentioned that it reduced the, well, AI and ML, it reduced the amount of patients in clinical trial that you need to call upon. What if we could have a digital twin version of our brains, a digital twin version of the drug, and just fully try their experiments in the cloud? When do you foresee that happening? And when we have very conclusive results and we're sure that the drug is safe, we could actually test it on a couple of humans. What do you think about that? And do you think this is realistic?
Yeah, so the first thing is, so these drugs have already, like the one that I mentioned, lecanemab, already got full FDA approval. So it's the drug that's currently being used now. So it's already completed its phase 3 trial, so and quite successfully, I would say. And then there's another one, donanemab, which is also bringing very interesting results. And I expect that it might be approved sometime next year. Beyond that, so where I see this kind of digital twins being applied is more, as you said, we can create this kind of this kind of data, like this kind of a bit more artificial data sets where we can train these models. But at the end of the day, we have already enough real world data to start running the simulations, not as a digital twin, but actually the digital twin helps and around in providing this kind of safe environment where you can test it before. But I think that serves more for drugs that are earlier in the drug development stage, rather than this Alzheimer's drugs that are very rarely completed phase 3 trials. And I think where like the next step is probably try, as I mentioned, combination therapy, and that's where we can probably create simulations and how these drugs might potentially interact. But we still need some kind of real world data, even in a small subset, just to be able to create these models and based on something. So we need some kind of outcome prediction that allows us to translate that into a more artificial environment.
And do you feel that Montreal is well placed as an ecosystem with some focus concentration in AI, some focus in concentration in pharma, and now like a burgeoning ecosystem in the neuroscience field?
Yeah, so we have had a very strategic, not necessarily by intent, but a very strategic combination of factors and industries. So Montreal has always been a very important hub for the run of clinical trial sites in North America, not only because of our very similar population with the US, so you can always try sites are similar but at a lower cost here, and there's also the vibrant AI ecosystem. So we have the Mila Institute, which is the AI institute directed by Joshua Benjo, which is named many times the godfather of AI. And not only him, but a brilliant community of AI researchers. And that together with a very strong, for example, at the Neuro, we have one of the key sites worldwide in terms of neuroscience. We have some brilliant neuroscientists and neurologists that are working in the space. So if you combine all of those, we have, I think, a very dynamic environment, and it's still very centered in North America. So we're only an hour away from Boston. So it's really a very substantial intersection of key sectors. And on top of that, we have had like support from a number of players in the pharmaceutical industry who saw the potential, and I think have pushed the ecosystem even further. Like you probably heard, like Moderna has opened a site here together with McGill. So they're partnering up. There's a number of pharmaceutical companies that are supporting the ecosystem as well. So altogether, it becomes a very vibrant environment.
So what do you foresee for yourself next year? What are your top 3 goals? What do you want to focus your time on?
So we want to focus our time. I want to focus my time in trying to develop a bit more a pipeline that allows us to detect patients early. So now that we have drugs that are coming into the market, we need tools that allows us to identify these patients at this early stages, which I mentioned before, we call MCI. Because if we detect them too late, then these patients are no longer eligible, and then they miss something we call the therapeutic window. So the other thing is we're starting a campaign based on, there used to be a campaign for stroke called Time is Brain. And we want to push that concept of time is brain to the Alzheimer's disease space, because as I mentioned before, there was this understanding among the population, among ordinary citizens, that Alzheimer is something that, there's time, we can wait until until things get a bit worse, and then we'll see. But really, once we identify the symptoms, and once we identify that the patient is in that trajectory, we need to act, and we need to act fast. It might not be as fast as stroke, but we need to act fast, because every week, every month that we wait, then you're starting to lose capacity, you're starting to lose function, and you're also losing that window where we can act and actually provide with a potential solution to keep you in that state longer. And so, yeah, those are two objectives that we want for the field, and we hope, and I hope, that we are able to bring a little bit of difference in patients' lives, because this is a population that has been looking for some kind of alternative or solution once they are diagnosed, and until the moment there has been nothing, right? So we want to help.
Right. And where can people find out more about you, Adrian?
So you can always check our website. It's perceive.ai, and you can always find me at the Neuro or Montreal. If you like a good bagel, there's a couple of bagel places that we're famous for. I'm usually around those as well.
That was Adrian, Noriega, and Charles Cormier for another Wisdom Podcast.